So let's talk about choosing classes, like for the next year or semester. You know the process where you start by figuring out which electives and which core classes you have to fit into your schedule, and then you begin to talk to like the older students or your friends, and you talk to people who've taken those classes, and you get a full recommendation on professors and times, and then you go through aligning your schedule. You meet with your advisor, and you're like making sure everything fits just right, and you get the right professors or teachers for the right classes at the right times of day, because honestly, math plus lunch equals nap, right? This is an incredibly complex process that we put a lot of effort into. Why? Because the truth is, now real talk, don't tell my mom, but when you look at that class schedule that you get for the first time, before you share it on your story to see if anybody else has those classes, you take a look at it, right? At least I did, and you go, well, this class is going to be really easy. I barely even have to show up. Like, this class is going to be, about average, and this class, if I don't actually dedicate some time and some energy to studying, will probably kick my butt, right? You go through this process of arranging your classes and determining the amount of energy, or at least I did. What do you think of when I say study? Does it have a negative connotation? Is it something useless for people in high academia? Is it something that comes naturally to you, something you enjoy? Is it something that you cannot stand with everything that you are? Does it feel like work? Does it feel like fun? All these things we bring to the idea of study spiritually. Now, this is the 28th Trinity session, which is pretty incredible. And I'm guessing by now, in your study practices, you've already run into a couple of roadblocks. Probably the most important one being those insights that seem so simple are incredibly hard to find, right? Like, it takes a tremendous amount of effort and energy to find a beautiful little insight, even the smallest one. What I would like to suggest to you today is that, yes, you are right, that studying is hard and it takes a lot of work, and sometimes it's easy, but sometimes it's not. And one of the things that really can help our study efforts is to create a structure to help our minds sort of process information and learn. Why do teachers have lesson plans and unit plans? Well, it's because our brains work like stacking blocks. You can only learn what you have a foundation to build upon, right? So like addition, 1 + 1 = 2. Multiplication, 2 × 2 = 4. And they build on each other, and those concepts eventually become very large structures, so to speak, in our brains. That's how we learn concepts. So what do we do with spiritual study? Well, it's kind of the same way. Like, for one thing, it just takes time. Like, be patient. Don't sell yourself short. Your goal is not to learn everything you ever could know about Jesus or God or following Jesus in the next 6 weeks or even 6 months. Your goal is to learn as much as you can about Jesus and following Jesus in the next 60 years. This is a lifetime pursuit, and the longer you go, the more impressed you'll be with how much you've learned. But here's the other thing, is sometimes we just need a little bit of structure to help us. Back in the 6th century AD, there were some monks, some Catholic monks, who started this thing called Lectio Divina. Lectio Divina means, like, quite literally, a divine reading. It's this process of reading scripture or the Bible in a way that helps us understand both what the words are saying and what God might be saying to us specifically. By the 12th century AD, they had a very specific pattern that many monasteries did, that many monks in monasteries, I should say, practiced. Lectio Divina has been around for a very, very long time. But just because it's old doesn't mean it's useless. Actually, we believe that it's got a tremendous amount of benefit. Almost every time I've practiced Lectio Divina, I've learned something really cool about myself or about God or about other people. And I really think that today that can be true for you too. So here's your Trinity practice. With your group, practice Lectio Divina. Now, it's way simpler than it sounds, and I know it seems kind of intimidating, but trust me, this process can be a lot of fun if you let it. So each person in your group is going to take a turn reading a passage. Today, Psalm 119, verses 9 through 16. Psalm 119, verses 9 through 16. Each person in your group will read that passage aloud for the rest of the group one time. While the first person is reading that passage, you're just going to listen. And as a good friend of mine says, listen as if your life depended on it, right? Like, invest all of the energy you have into listening to those words as they are read, right? So the first person is going to read, and everyone else is just going to listen to become familiar with that reading. Now, as the second person reads, what you're going to do is listen for a word or a phrase that sticks out. Could be any word or any phrase for any reason. Sometimes it's a word or a phrase that you've heard before, or something that you've read in another part of the Bible. It's kind of a similar phrase. Maybe it's something you've been thinking about. Maybe it just pops out of nowhere and like literally lights up in your brain for no reason that you can understand. So as the second person reads, remember, you're going to listen for a word or a phrase that sticks out. Now, as the third person takes their turn reading, you're going to listen not for a word or a phrase, but for what God might be calling you into or asking of you, right? So as we go through this process, remember, we're going to become familiar with the text, then we're going to listen for a word or a phrase, and then we're going to allow God to speak into what he might be asking us to do. Could be simple. Could be, hey, you need to go apologize to your sibling. Could be, hey, I need to have a chat with my boyfriend or girlfriend about our relationship and the places we allow ourselves to go. Could be something big like life scale about like, hey, God's asking me, I think, to be a teacher and to help people learn. All of which are valid and cool. Now, after the third person reads, we want you to share the word or phrase and what you feel like God was calling you into steps 2 and 3. And don't get frustrated. This may take some time. It may take some energy. Like anything, it's often uncomfortable at first, but once you understand how to move through the structure, a whole new rhythm of life appears. So if your group has to do it 2 or 3 times for it to feel comfortable or for you to feel like you can actually participate in it, that's totally fine. Don't give up, be patient, and just see how God meets you in the studying with Lectio Divina. You guys have a wonderful day. We'll see you right back here tomorrow for the next Trinity session.